Chapter 41. Rejection. After graduating from university, Isla had been working in the Olsen family business. She knew Mrs. Olsen's email password like the back of her hand and had studied the content of emails between Mrs. Olsen and Dr. South. She noticed that Dr. South would reply to Mrs. Olsen instantly without asking extra questions and would solve the issue at hand right away. He clearly held Mrs. Olsen in high esteem. That was why Isla dared to fabricate the lie that Dr. South had accepted the Horton Group's invitation. With a smile on her face, Isla opened the email and saw the reply.
I'm only responsible for the Olsen family. I'm not required to deal with issues concerning the Horton Group.
Isla's smile froze. Seeing that she was upset, Jake asked with a frown.
What's wrong?
Regaining her composure, Isla lied.
Dr. South said that it would take a few days to solve this issue.
Jake heaved a sigh of relief.
That's normal. This issue is indeed challenging, but I have a bet with the people of Group 1 that we'll have the solution before Friday. Is that okay?
Isla said confidently.
No problem.
But her eyes were flickering. He said he had a bet with Keira. Jake quickly returned to the Horton family. Thinking about Keira, he felt somewhat uneasy. Oliver, his father, smiled at him and patted his shoulder, which was quite unusual, and praised him.
Here comes my amazing son. You actually managed to invite Dr. South, and you will quickly establish yourself in the R&D department.
Jake was pleasantly surprised.
Dad, don't worry. I'll work much harder to help you regain your position of power.
Good.
Oliver went to the master bedroom without any intention of going out again.
Jake, is your dad not going out to find that woman tonight? Is he staying home instead?
Jake's mother, Melissa Knight, had tears of joy in her eyes.
You have to be better than that illegitimate daughter. Only then will your father change your attitude.
She wiped her tears. Watching his mother happily enter the bedroom, Jake clenched his fists. Proposing to Isla and bringing Dr. South as part of the bargain was his correct first step. Having already made a choice, he wouldn't have regrets. As for Keira, she had to be his. Keira sneezed. She rubbed her nose and returned her gaze to her computer, reaching out blindly to get some water, but realized she had already emptied her glass. She placed the cup back and continued to immerse herself in her work. All of a sudden, her vision dimmed. Looking up, she saw Louis fetching her a glass of water and placing it on the side table. Keira was slightly baffled.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. It was nothing.
After that, he returned to his usual spot. Old Mrs. Horton looked at the two, unable to stop grinning. She felt she would see her great-grandson before long. What should she call the child of her grandson and her granddaughter-in-law? Old Mrs. Horton put on her reading glasses, picked up the dictionary and the book of songs, and started flipping through it. As the night grew deeper, the Shiba Inu named Kitten was bored and left old Mrs. Horton's side. It wagged its tail at Keira and finally lay down and slept at Louis's feet. The next day, Louis didn't show signs of an injury and was still in his black suit. Burns were typically the most hurtful kind of injury, but he endured the pain without uttering a word since being injured. Keira couldn't help but marvel at his resilience. As they left for work, Keira no longer felt awkward and got into Louis's car. Tom was sitting in the passenger seat and observed the two of them through the rearview mirror. His boss and Miss Olsen were each doing their own thing, not communicating or having a conversation, but he felt something subtly changing. The car soon arrived at the company, and Keira bid Louis farewell as she got out. She was immediately stopped by Jake upon reaching the R&D department. He was standing in the rest area outside the elevator with a cup of coffee.
There's an industry networking event about new energy sources tonight. All distinguished individuals from the industry have been invited, and Dr. South might attend.
Keira didn't stop.
Then?
The R&D department of Horton Group received an invitation. I could take you to broaden your horizons and network, which would be beneficial to your future career development.
No need. Thank you.
Keira entered the group office without looking back. Jake stayed where he was, his face grim. Jalen, yawning and wearing slippers, casually walked past him and said mockingly,
Just an invitation, and you think you can buy her over? Keira isn't that short-sighted.
Jake coldly replied,
Jalen, if you truly care for her, you should be encouraging her to follow me. You know that I can offer her better resources. Who do you think can attend this kind of gatherings?
Jalen looked at him.
At least I can take her there.
It was not surprising for Jalen to get an invitation, since he was the core member of the R&D department. Jake's eyes glinted. Keira worked the whole day. At the end of the day, Jalen stopped her.
There's a job tonight. Come with me.
All right.
Without giving it much thought, Keira only texted Lewis saying that she would be working overtime and rode off with Jalen. They soon arrived at a commercial cocktail party. Jalen explained,
You stick with me later, and I'll introduce you to some influential figures in the industry. Dr. South rarely attends these kinds of gatherings. Chances are he won't be there, so don't get your hopes up.
Keira understood and couldn't help but chuckle. She was genuinely uninterested in these sorts of networking events, but since they were already there, they might as well check it out. It seemed that she hadn't seen Samuel in a long time. As the two reached at the entrance, Jalen showed the invitation, preparing to bring her in, but was stopped by a staff member.
I'm sorry, Mr. Riley, but we've been informed about the attendees from the Horton Group today, and your name is not on the list.
Jalen frowned.
How is this possible?
His reputation in the circle was highly regarded, and ordinarily such social gatherings were events he wouldn't bother to attend. How could he not be allowed in? Jake walked out with a glass of champagne and squinted.
Mr. Riley, there are a lot of tasks in Group 1 of the R&D, and I thought you wouldn't attend, so I declined on your behalf when they were preparing the list. I'm afraid it's too late to add you back in now. You should head back.
Jake was furious.
Jake, you've crossed the line. Why do you get to turn down the invitation on my behalf?
Jake coldly retorted.
Jalen, you must understand that your standing in the industry is due to the Horton Group. They invited you as a member of the Horton Group. And as the deputy manager of the R&D department, of course I can decide for you.
Jalen was livid. People like him with real skills would be respected and given preferential treatment no matter which company they were in. If he were to leave the Horton Group, countless companies would want to hire him. Even the director of the R&D department wouldn't dare to disregard him. And yet Jake, the deputy, was trying to pull rank on him?
I advise you not to make a scene. We're all respectable people here. Surely, you wouldn't want it to be escorted away by security.
After Jake finished, he looked at Keira.
Keira, do you see it now? With my approval, you can't even get through this door.
Keira looked up calmly.
Is that so?
She took out her phone, opened the invitation from Samuel in her email, and handed it to the staff member. Chapter 42. Humiliation. Keira handed the invitation to the staff member.
Can I go in now?
With just a glance, the staff member immediately stepped aside respectfully.
Please?
Jake frowned at this. He took a step forward, looking at Kira's phone.
Don't tell me you took someone else's invitation. They check identification here.
Then he saw the name on the invitation and was stunned. At these industry gatherings, the nominal company and position of the invitee were typically written on the invitation. Jalen's invitation wasn't just issued in consideration of the Horton Group, but also due to his personal influence. The work unit was only added because he was part of the Horton Group. However, some guests had complicated backgrounds or were famous enough not to need such titles. The invitation in Keira's hand simply read Keira Olsen. Jake asked in shock,
In what capacity did you get this invitation?
None of your business.
Keira calmly switched off her phone screen and looked at Jalen.
Shall we go in?
Jalen had initially resigned to the fact that he might be at a disadvantage today and was regretting his inability to bring Keira in. He was taken aback by the sudden turn of events. He followed Keira into the banquet hall.
Where did you get the invitation?
Just as Keira was about to speak, Jalen cut her off.
It must have been arranged by her cousin, right? It doesn't specify any company, so you aren't beholden to anyone.
His face darkened.
Jake has crossed the line this time. I won't let this matter go easily.
Keira thought he was going to say that he'd go see the director of the R&D department or make a scene at the board, but surprisingly, he said,
When we get back to the company, I'll go find my cousin and ask him to stand up for me.
Keira was perplexed. What happened to hating nepotism? Probably noticing her confusion, Jalen sheepishly scratched his nose.
I don't hate nepotism. I hate useless people squatting in positions because of their connections. You don't know how many people in the Horton Group are coasting by on their connections. Anyway, why should I tell you all this?
He picked up a glass of champagne.
Let me introduce you to a few people.
Before Keira had a chance to refuse, Jalen was already calling out.
Mr. King!
Keira could only follow him. The middle-aged man referred to as Mr. King was a senior in the industry, and a throng of people were already engaged in making small talk with him. He was very respectful to Jalen.
Mr. Riley, it's rare for you to attend events like this. You finally have time to exchange views with us old-timers today?
Jalen responded with a laugh.
As a junior, I'm not at all qualified to share my views with you all. Today, I brought someone here to listen to your insights.
He pushed Keira to the front.
This is our company's new talent. She resolved a major issue that's been troubling me for a month. It's only today that we found the time to leave the office.
A problem that could trouble Mr. Riley was definitely not a trivial one. Jalen deliberately mentioned it to give Keira a step up. Mr. King and the others indeed showed interest in Keira and turned to look at her with smiles.
Oh, really? We can't wait for you to introduce her to us.
Before Jalen could do that, a woman's voice interrupted him.
Oh, Mr. King. Long time no see.
Everyone turned to look and found Isla in a blue dress with her arm interlinked with Jake Horton. As soon as she opened her mouth, Mr. King and his companions immediately surrounded her.
Miss Olsen, it's been a long time. Are you here today with Dr. South?
Isla smiled.
I don't know about that. I'm here with my fiancé today. He also works in renewable energy.
Jake extended his hand to Mr. King.
I'm Jake Horton from Horton Group.
Mr. King suddenly realized who he was.
I see. You are young Mr. Horton. What a pleasure to meet you.
Miss Olsen, you and young Mr. Horton are a perfect match.
Miss Olsen, we heard that Dr. South had been advising the Olsen family. When will he finally show himself so we can all learn something from him?
Miss Olsen, what problems has Dr. South resolved for your family?
Everyone was crowding around Isla. Jalen and Keira were pushed to the edge of the crowd.
They're doing it on purpose.
Jalen's expression darkened further, and then he said,
But all of them combined can't compare to Dr. South. Samuel Morgan will be here later. You can have a few drinks with him.
Keira didn't know what to say. Jalen continued,
You don't need to feel awkward. Just thicken your skin a little. So many people want to get to know Samuel. I'm still not familiar with him up to now.
Keira twitched her mouth.
I can introduce you to him later.
Jalen, however, dismissed it offhand.
You should get to know him first.
At that moment, a commotion erupted at the entrance. Keira turned to look and saw Samuel arrive. He was wearing a light gray suit with one hand in his pocket. His face was expressionless, quite unlike his usual talkative self in front of her. Seeing him, the crowd immediately rushed over.
Mr. Morgan, long time no see.
What project have you been busy with recently? Which direction?
Isla and Jake didn't immediately follow them. Instead, they walked toward Keira. A smile appeared on Isla's face.
Keira, do you need me to introduce you to Mr. Morgan?
Jake looked somber.
Considering she couldn't get the invitation, she must have extensive connections. I bet she's known Mr. Morgan for a long time and doesn't need your introduction.
Isla said.
Oh, is that so? Mr. Morgan has always been unapproachable. Not everyone can go up and start a conversation with him. I was thinking... Never mind, I won't be teaching my grandmother to suck eggs.
Disregarding their sarcastic comments, Jalen picked up a glass of champagne from the side and handed it to Keira, giving her a little nudge.
Go and toast Mr. Morgan.
Jake scoffed.
Horton Group won't use sex to serve others. More importantly, did you think Samuel Morgan was the lecherous type? So many beautiful women have tried to seduce him to get information on Dr. South. Yet, he's remained indifferent. Do you really think you're so beautiful that you can seduce anyone?
Isla nudged.
Jake, let's go meet Mr. Morgan.
Jake nodded, and the two of them walked toward Samuel Morgan when Isla called out,
Hi, Mr. Morgan?
Samuel didn't look their way at first, but upon hearing his name, he glanced in their direction. Seeing Isla, he pursed his lips and was about to look away. He then suddenly noticed the person behind her. Samuel was initially taken aback. Then he walked excitedly toward Keira. Seeing Samuel's reaction, Isla was overjoyed. She had encountered Samuel a few times after she started working at the Olsen family's company, but Samuel was always aloof and ignored her. She hadn't expected him to acknowledge her in front of outsiders. Jake straightened up as well. Seeing Samuel Morgan's reaction, he thought Dr. South held a high opinion of Isla. The duo greeted Morgan with smiles on their faces. Isla began to introduce Jake.
Mr. Morgan, this is...
But before she could finish, Samuel breezed past them, heading toward the person behind them. Both were dumbfounded and turned around to find Samuel standing in front of Keira.
What are you doing here?
Everyone was stunned. At these kinds of gatherings, Samuel always held himself aloof. When had they ever seen him this enthusiastic? And the way he spoke to her? What was the background of this 20-something young woman? Isla clenched her fists, feeling a burning sensation on her face. Jake frowned, his gaze shifting between Samuel and Keira.
You two know each other?
Samuel looked at Keira and hesitated to speak. He didn't know if his boss wanted to reveal her identity. Sure enough, the next second, Keira raised the champagne in her hand to Samuel with a warning look in her eyes.
Mr. Morgan, hello. I'm too young to bear this formality.
Samuel took the hint and cleared his throat.
Miss Olsen, I didn't expect to meet you here, so I was overly excited.
At his words, everyone looked at Keira's stunning face and seemed to understand something. They all broke into laughter. Mr. King walked over and teased.
Mr. Morgan, truly, you have good taste. She's indeed a rare beauty.
Samuel quickly returned.
Miss Olsen is not only beautiful but also incredibly capable.
Mr. King was taken aback. Jalen had just praised Keira as well. He finally took her seriously.
Miss Olsen, this is my business card. I hope we can have an opportunity to work together in the future.
After Mr. King, the rest of the crowd quickly chimed in.
To be praised by Mr. Morgan, Miss Olsen must be extraordinary.
Such accomplishment at a young age.
Keira wasn't fond of these gatherings and just responded with a faint smile. Jalen, on the other hand, was chatting and mingling with them. As Jake watched Keira shine like a newly risen star, he felt a discomfort in his chest. He scoffed.
No matter how capable she is, Can she be more capable than Dr. South?
At his words, the crowd fell silent. Samuel raised an eyebrow and revealed a meaningful smile, but said nothing. Keira was calmly holding her champagne glass with no intention of responding. In the end, it was Mr. King who broke the awkward situation.
The highest level in the industry, of course, would be Dr. South. But Miss Olsen is so young with such a promising future. I heard from Mr. Riley that you are also working for the Horton Group? Young Mr. Horton, your company attracts such talent all the time.
Keira couldn't help but approve of his words. With this triple compliment, no one was offended, and Jake was flattered as well. He didn't say anything else. The lively atmosphere returned, and everyone continued their laughter and conversation. Samuel didn't dare to bring the topic back to Keira again, and the crowd's attention was quickly back on him, asking him about Dr. South's whereabouts. Keira took this opportunity to slip out of the crowd. The lobby was brightly lit. Everyone dressed smartly and was toasting and exchanging drinks. Although the place was full of people, Keira didn't enjoy the liveliness. On the contrary, she found it more comfortable when she was in the hospital with the old lady and Louis in one room while each was minding their own business. She walked onto the balcony, took out her phone, and found a message from Louis.
I just happened to be at a Royal Hotel for a meeting. We can go back together when it's over.
Keira smiled and suddenly felt like leaving. It was entirely acceptable to leave such an occasion early. Jalen followed her out.
No wonder you said you'd introduce me to Samuel Morgan. You two know each other so well.
Keira didn't deny it and gave him a light smile. Jalen recalled what happened at the banquet just now. Although Samuel was talking to others, his gaze always seemed to drift toward her. Samuel must be interested in Keira. They were all grown-ups. Samuel was handsome and capable. He would be a good choice. So he asked,
What do you think of Samuel?
Keira considered the question and answered,
He's dependable, hardworking, and trustworthy.
He was a very useful subordinate. Otherwise, she wouldn't have entrusted him with full control of the company. Jalen's eyes lit up.
So you're saying you're also attracted to him?
If Keira could really be with Samuel, he would surely introduce her to Dr. South. Keira was dumbfounded. Only then did she understand what Jalen meant, and she was about to laugh and reply when a cough suddenly came from nearby. The two of them turned their heads and saw Louis standing on the balcony of the next banquet hall. He was half a head taller than Jalen. At this moment, his expression was dark, and his black eyes were cold as they watched them. Louis didn't expect to bump into them by such a coincidence either. As he walked by, he appeared to hear their conversation. The few praises Keira had for Samuel Morgan made him feel inexplicably uncomfortable. He harshly reprimanded Jalen.
Miss Olsen is already married. What are you messing around here for? It's absurd.
Jalen felt somewhat aggrieved. He didn't know that Keira was married. Why was his cousin suddenly angry at him? But he quickly looked at Keira.
You're married. Does Samuel know?
He didn't want Samuel to be turned down and became resentful. Samuel might target Keira. Keira nodded.
Yes.
Jalen finally breathed a sigh of relief and then asked curiously,
You're so young. Why did you get married so early? Who's your spouse? You're so dedicated.
Keira glanced at Louis without saying anything. Louis simply said,
You talk too much.
Jalen was speechless. He had a feeling his cousin was acting strange today. Louis narrowed his eyes, turned to Keira, and asked,
I'm here to leave. Are you coming with me?
Keira immediately nodded.
Sure, I'll meet you at the entrance.
Jalen hastily followed her.
Wait for me. I'm coming with you.
Back in the banquet hall, seeing Jake's gloomy face, Isla felt uneasy. Did Keira know Dr. South as well as Samuel? Just as she was thinking about this, Jake had already walked up to Samuel.
Mr. Morgan, does Keira know Dr. South as well?
The people around immediately gazed at him. Samuel could imagine that if he said yes, these people would probably rush toward Keira and force her to reveal her relationship with Dr. South. He cleared his throat.
How could that be possible?
Isla and Jake both breathed a sigh of relief. Samuel noticed Keira walking toward the exit and quickly said,
I have some errands to run. I should leave now. We'll talk later.
Everyone smiled meaningfully when they saw him chase after Keira. Jake's face darkened even more. Samuel caught up with Keira at the entrance.
I need to go abroad to discuss a project tomorrow. I'll be taking the company's seal and patent descriptions. I just wanted to let you know.
Keira nodded. Only then did Samuel leave. After he left, Keira suddenly noticed the strange look in Jalen's eyes. He stared at her.
Something's not right. If Mr. Morgan is going abroad, why is he reporting to you? Could it be...
He gave her a dumbfounded look. Keira hesitated for a moment, then sighed.
Okay, I admit it. I am Dr. South.
Chapter 44. Tell her. Keira's identity wasn't something she needed to keep a secret. She had no intention of hiding it from her team. As long as there wasn't any widespread proclamation, it should save her from any unnecessary trouble. So when Jalen sensed something was amiss, she decided to just come clean. Upon hearing her words, Jalen was startled. He stared at Keira in disbelief. Then he suddenly let out a chuckle.
You do have a sense of humor.
Keira didn't know what to say. Jalen said,
I may not have met Dr. South, but I know for sure that to have academic talents like him, one must be at least in their 40s. You can't fool me.
Keira twitched the corner of her lips.
No, really. I am Dr. South.
So you thought saying that would get rid of my suspicions?
Jalen looked her up and down, furrowing his eyebrows.
Don't tell me you're having an affair with Samuel.
Keira said,
You have quite a vivid imagination.
What in the world? Jalen frowned, advising her.
Don't do that kind of thing. It'll humiliate us all. It's not good. I really look down on cheaters. We're all respectable people. If you don't love your husband, just divorce and remarry.
Just as he said those words, he suddenly felt a chill down his spine, as if there was a murderous intent. He turned around and found Louis striding out, his deep eyes as cold as ancient ice, making Jalen feel as if he was chilled to the bone. Jalen was even more puzzled.
Louis, did your business deal not go well today?
Louis looked away.
You talk too much.
Jalen was speechless. Keira noticed that Jalen, the fearless heir, was most afraid of his cousin. At this moment, a flashy yellow sports car pulled up in front of them. Samuel whistled at her.
Miss Olsen, I just got this car. How about I give you a ride?
He was eager to show off to his boss. Thinking about Keira's driving speed, he wanted to make her scream. Keira caught the hint in his eyes and was about to refuse, but Louis suddenly spoke up.
It's out of your way.
Samuel smiled.
Wherever she's going, it's on my way.
Keira was a little speechless and subconsciously looked at Jalen. The suspicion in his eyes had deepened. She didn't notice that Louis's face had darkened. Louis glanced at her, his sharp eyebrows furrowing slightly as he advised softly.
After drinking, don't get in a stranger's car.
Keira raised an eyebrow, looking at Samuel.
I think I'll ride with Miss Horton.
All right.
Samuel hung his head, seemingly less interested.
See you then.
Vroom, the sports car roared to start and quickly disappeared out of sight. It was then that Louis's black Bentley slowly rolled up. The extended version of the Bentley felt much sturdier and safer than that thin sports car. Tom ran over to open the door. Louis gestured for Keira to get in first. Then he got in the car. When Jalen was about to get in, he was stopped.
Don't you have a car?
Jalen said.
I drank today. I see.
Louis responded indifferently.
Then you can take a cab.
Jalen was speechless. What happened to don't get in a stranger's car after drinking? The car door closed and the Bentley mercilessly drove off, leaving Jalen standing there alone. The car steadily drove down the road. Outside the car window, kaleidoscopic neon lights poured into the compartment as Louis's gaze brushed over the woman sitting next to him. streetlights cast on her beautiful face, bathing it in a faint halo of light. Lewis was momentarily lost before suddenly speaking up.
Miss Olson, could you help me change my bandages?
At these words, Keira paused. She slowly raised her head to look at him, seemingly taken aback.
Now?
Yes.
Lewis nodded.
If we wait until the hospital, my grandmother will be upset if she sees it.
So that was it. Keira breathed a quiet sigh of relief.
Okay.
He undressed, turning his back toward her. Keira turned on the ceiling light in the car and looked at him. This was the second time she saw him half naked. He was surprisingly muscular, despite his slender appearance when he was dressed. He was radiating an exuberant sense of power. She focused her attention on his wounds. The blister hadn't reoccurred because he had a quick metabolism, typical for a young man. She sighed in admiration before taking out gauze and ointment from the first aid box to change his bandage. After applying the ointment, she prepared to wrap the gauze around his wounds. She knelt on the back seat and reached around Lewis's body. She was just about to sit back up when, whoosh, the car suddenly swerved, causing Keira to fall into Lewis. Her face landed on his shoulder. Lewis soon steadied himself by pressing his hands on the seat. But then he felt Keira's arms around him. Her soft hands instinctively held onto his chest, instantly making him stiffen. Then he felt her soft lips lightly touching his shoulder. His breath hitched, feeling as if that area of his skin had become sensitive, like 1,000 ants crawling from his shoulder to his limbs. Lewis froze, his mind blank for a moment. Keira noticed his unusual reaction and thought she might have hurt his wounds. As soon as she steadied herself, she immediately pushed him away and asked,
Miss Horton, are you in pain?
Her words finally helped Lewis to find his voice again. He said hoarsely,
I'm fine.
Only then did Keira breathe a sigh of relief. She continued to wrap his wound with the gauze. Lewis immediately put on his shirt and sat there with a straight face. He felt that the space inside the car was too narrow and the air was insufficient. It was extremely stuffy. Thinking about those two hands and the remaining sensations on his shoulder, he loosened his tie. As soon as the car arrived at the hospital and came to a halt, he abruptly opened the door and bolted out, heading upstairs without looking back. Keira slowly got out of the car, watching him leave. She couldn't resist asking Tom,
How much did he lose in the negotiation tonight to be so angry?
Tom rolled his eyes in his mind. The acquisition tonight cost $100 million less than the budget. His boss was very happy. However, he didn't say anything and just quickly followed Lewis. Keira shook her head slightly, ready to go upstairs, when suddenly a shadow darted in front of her, grinning.
My dear niece.
It was her Uncle Finley. He glanced at the Bentley behind him, then turned back to watch Lewis with shifty eyes.
Mr. Horton must think very highly of you. Has he given you any money?
Keira narrowed her eyes and couldn't help but laugh.
Of course. Not only Miss Horton, but old Mrs. Horton also gave me some.
Finley's eyes lit up instantly. Keira then said,
By the way, put a price on the truth you mentioned last time.
Finley was taken aback. He said sincerely,
I can only get a payoff from you from that truth. So you need to pay enough, and then I will reveal it.
Keira was fiddling with her phone. In no time, Finley's phone buzzed with a notification of a bank transfer of $30,000. He was overjoyed. Keira said,
That's a deposit. I have another 70,000 here. Tell me. And it's all yours. Of course, I have to first determine whether your truth is worth its money.
Yes, it's definitely worth it. It's related to you.
Terrified that the deal would slip through his fingers, Finley said hastily,
I will tell you right now.
Chapter 45, Family. Keira narrowed her eyes.
Speak.
Finley took a step forward, lowering his voice.
This truth of mine, even if I sell it to you for $100,000, it's still a bargain. The Olsen family is so rich.
Does the truth have something to do with the Olsen family?
Keira clenched her jaw.
Yes?
Finley gave a sneaky smile.
Actually, you are...
Before he could finish his sentence, an angry voice ran out.
Finley Hill! Keira Olsen! What are you two doing?
Keira turned her head only to see Isla, disheveled and still in her party dress, running toward them. Finley chuckled.
I'm just doing business with my niece.
Isla clenched her fists.
I already gave you the money.
Finley shrugged.
But I need more money now.
How much more?
Isla took a deep breath.
I'll give it to you.
Finley laughed.
Just now, my niece promised me $100,000.
Isla tightly clenched her fists. Finley heaved a sigh.
I guess I will make a deal with my niece.
I have the money.
Isla gritted her teeth.
You go first. I'll give you the money tomorrow.
Okay.
Finley turned around and ran off, speaking to Keira as he did so.
My dear niece, consider that $30,000 alone.
He ran off quickly, afraid that Keira would demand the money back. What a deadbeat. Keira remained unperturbed. If she wanted to get her money back, she had plenty of ways. She turned and walked toward the hospital building. Behind her, Isla answered her ringing phone.
Hello, Jake.
Isla, I remember Mrs. Olsen is from Clans. Ask her if she knows anyone from the Allen family.
The Allen family?
Yes, the head of the family is named Frankie Allen. I just received news that my uncle wants to sign a contract with the Allen family, but he doesn't have any connections yet.
Isla instantly saw light. Jake wanted to use the Allen family to reinforce his standing in the Horton group. She answered,
Okay, I'll ask my mom in a bit.
After hanging up, Isla calmed herself down. If she could marry into the Horton family, $100,000 would be nothing. She needed to think of a way to connect with the Allen family. Mrs. Olsen was staying in a second-floor VIP ward, and old Mrs. Horton was on the third floor. Keira and Isla ascended the stairs together. When they reached the second floor, they saw a mother talking to her son. The mother said happily,
Your third uncle just now, seeing she has introduced you to a rich girl, you must go for the blind date.
The son complained.
Mom, my wife just needs surgery and she will be cured. Why should I date someone else?
Didn't you hear what the nurse said? The operation will cost $70,000, not to mention the post-op care, which will cost more. Where will we get that kind of money?
The son pondered for a moment.
Let's sell the house. She bought it with her Dory.
The mother shook her head in disapproval.
We can't sell the house. If she dies, you could still find someone better when you have a house. If you lose the house, you lose everything. After having lived together for 2 years, consider the house compensation for your wasted youth.
The son was taken aback.
That doesn't seem right. She fell out with her family for me.
The mother sneered.
It's precisely because she fell out with them that she hasn't been in touch with her family these 2 years. She can't expect support from her family, and nobody cares whether she lives or dies.
She lowered her voice.
We'll just say we have no money and take her home. Once she's dead, which will happen very soon, you can marry the girl from the blind date. This one has nice white hips, which is a good sign for childbearing. She won't be like your wife, who's from a good family but doesn't have enough luck to enjoy it.
The son squinted, suddenly interested.
Then let's not trade her.
Although the pair lowered their voices, the hallway was very quiet and had echoes. Thus, Keira heard everything clearly. She paused. She found the mother-in-law very wicked, and the son was equally disagreeable. She wondered which unfortunate girl had encountered such a hideous pair. Just as she thought of this, she felt something and looked toward the direction of the corridor. A frail girl with a very pale complexion dressed in a patient's gown was standing by the door. The mother and son also saw her, and their expressions changed dramatically. The son spoke up.
Rebecca?
The girl named Rebecca said.
Call my dad. He'll give me the money for the medical fees.
The mother scoffed.
We already tried, but as soon as they saw it was my son's number, they hung up. You severed ties with them. Why are you looking for them now?
Leaning against the wall and barely managing to stand there, Rebecca was quivering all over. She was so weak that she almost couldn't speak. She said to the son,
Then give me your phone. I'll call my brother.
The son blinked.
Don't cause a scene. You're seriously ill. The doctor doesn't allow you to use the phone.
Without hesitation, he said,
Mom, you go handle the discharge procedure, and I will take her home.
Rebecca tried to run but was too weak. She fell to the ground and used the last of her strength to latch onto Isla's leg. She whispered,
Help me call my brother, please.
As Isla was about to go to the second floor, she was closer to the hallway. When she was grabbed instead of feeling sympathetic, she immediately withdrew her leg. She rolled her eyes in disgust.
What do you want? For a guy you severed ties with your family? Someone obsessed with romance never ends well. All of this is your own fault.
Seeing that she didn't interfere, the mother and son sighed in relief. The son picked up Rebecca.
Rebecca Allen, your parents don't want you anymore. I'm your only guardian now. You are obliged to listen to me.
Rebecca was on the brink of despair. She knew that going home with this mother and son meant death. But she didn't want to die. She knew she was wrong. She wanted to see her brother. She missed her parents. Regretful tears rolled down her cheeks, and Rebecca closed her eyes. Just as she thought her life would freeze in this moment, an indifferent voice rang out.
Wait!
Rebecca opened her eyes, only to see the elegant figure stepping out from the shadows of the corridor. The woman's beautiful face showed no emotion as she walked up to her and simply said,
Phone number.
Tears flowed down Rebecca's face. The mother yelled,
What are you doing? I warned you, don't meddle in other people's affairs.
The son also said,
Even if you call, it will be useless. No one will answer.
However, Keira only looked at Rebecca.
The phone number.
Rebecca weakly recited a string of numbers. Keira took out her phone and dialed the number. The call was quickly answered and a young male voice came from the other end.
Hello, this is Frankie Allen.
Rebecca Allen is seriously ill and requires immediate surgery.
The person on the other end immediately became anxious, and she could tell that he was running. He asked,
Where is she?
Keira gave him the name of the hospital.
I happen to be in Oceania for work. It will take me half an hour to get there.
All right.
After hanging up, Keira turned to the mother and son.
Until her brother arrives, no one is allowed to take her away.
Hearing that, Isla snickered.
You're so meddling. Be careful when her family arrives. They might blame you for this.